Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to give people a few minutes to tune in before I get started. So if you all could bear with me a minute. And I'm going to share my screen in a minute. I just want a few people to tune in before we get started. And while I'm waiting, I just want to let you all know that I may interview a local poet. She released a book. It's very important, very powerful, and I may interview her. So you all look out for that. I'll make an announcement when it becomes official. So just look out for that. All right, so I'm going to get started. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. So if you could just bear with me a second. So today I was on Instagram and I saw this video that Umar Johnson posted, and I'm not going to play the video here. I don't want to deal with copyright issues, but I will have a link in the description box so that you can watch the video for yourself and judge it for yourself. But right now I'm just going to summarize some of the points that he made in this particular video and then provide my response, and then I'll respond to your comments in the chat room as well. So basically, he said that when people vote, they're not voting for a position, they're not voting for a principle or a platform or a pledge or a program or a process. They're voting for a personality. And then he went on to say that voting is just a popularity contest. And he says that often when people vote, he asked them, what did they vote for? Did they vote for better schools? Did they vote for economic opportunity? Did they vote to end mass incarceration or police brutality? He uses the term police genocide. And then he says he basically went on to say, what promise or pledge or platform or program did the candidate articulate that prompted you to vote for this particular candidate? And he basically said that he never gets a good answer to that question. And then he concluded by saying that democracy is a fraud. Now, I'll say this, man. First of all, obviously there are people, and let me stop sharing my screen for a second. Just bear with me 1 second. Just want to make sure the chat is up doing this, and I will get to your comments. Obviously, there are people who vote based on personality. There are a lot of ignorant voters who don't study the politics. They don't study the issues. They're not aware of the candidate's position on various issues. And for a lot of people, they vote based on their gut reaction. They vote based on like somebody's popularity, or if they like that person, or how that person looks, or how that person dressed, what kind of personality the person has. There are a lot of people that vote for those type of reasons, unfortunately. So for some people, it is true that they are just voting for somebody based on their personality and not based on their politics. So that's a valid point. And obviously, elections do come down to popularity. It's about which candidate has the most support from the people. And I think that the popularity is more than just personality. In the big scheme of things, it may have to do with, obviously, with their position on key issues. It has to do with the changing political climate. It has to do with geopolitics, the nature of the economy, and various other factors that make certain candidates more appealing to the people. So I don't think that it's simply a matter of personality. Many people are able to articulate the reason why they supported candidates. When he says that he talks to these people and he asks them this question and he says he's never gotten a good answer, I'm thinking, the first thought that I came to or thought about was the fact that he's probably talking to the wrong people. What people are you talking to when you ask them why did they vote for a particular candidate, or what policies did the candidate support that prompted somebody to vote for that candidate? He must be talking to the wrong people, because there are plenty of people who are informed about the issues, who study politics, who are aware of the candidates' track records, in terms of their votes on various issues of importance, in terms of their accomplishments and what they have done that's beneficial to the community. So there are plenty of people that would be able to answer Dr. Umar Johnson's question. If someone were to ask me, why did you vote for Bernie Sanders during the primary over Hillary Clinton? I could obviously articulate the reasons, and those people who are familiar with this channel know that I talk about those types of things all the time. And there are plenty of people that do this as well, whether they're doing videos or whether they're doing written political commentary, or if they're just a lay person, that doesn't write blogs or, do videos. They are able to articulate what particular policies prompted them to vote for certain candidates. And I think that it basically plays into a lot of negative stereotypes when you say that Black people don't focus on those types of things. So that's one thing that I wanted to talk about. And the other thing is this, there's a couple of other points that I want to raise as well. Democracy, when you say things like democracy is a fraud, basically, despite what Umar Johnson said, and that's what I need to point that out. In that particular video, Umar Johnson basically says that democracy is a fraud, but he also says that he doesn't discourage anybody from voting. When you say things like democracy is a fraud, you are basically encouraging people not to vote, whether you're saying it directly or indirectly. When you say things like that, you're basically saying that democracy is not an answer to the problems that we face as a people. You're basically suggesting that it's a joke, that it's you're saying that it's a fraud. So basically, you're saying that people shouldn't participate in it, whether you're saying that directly or not. And we know that Umar Johnson and a lot of these other people make statements regularly that basically downplay the significance of voting. And this is just yet another example of that. When he says that democracy is a fraud, I think that he's flat out wrong when he says that. And it's not about democracy not giving the people what they need. It's about the people not investing in democracy. When you don't have a political agenda, you can't talk about how democracy is a fraud when you haven't even articulated an agenda that you want to hold candidates accountable to. And when these people say that democracy is a fraud, I just wonder, what do they plan to replace democracy with? What kind of system do they plan to replace this so-called democracy with? What kind of alternative system do you have? What is your plan to affect change in the lives of Black people? In terms of these issues you talked about, like schools, economic opportunity, mass incarceration, police brutality. What is your plan to address those things, besides giving more and more lectures and entertaining people? What is your political agenda? What is your proposal to bring about these changes that we talk about all the time, these issues that we talk about? What is your plan to address those issues? That's what I have to ask these people when they say democracy is a fraud. Are you planning some revolution? Are you planning to separate? And if so, like, how are you going to do this stuff? I mean, we have to move beyond like fantasy talk. And that's too often what you hear among a lot of these people that are put out here as leaders on YouTube and other social media. It's like, where's the concrete plan to address these problems? Democracy is not the fraud. The people defraud themselves when they don't participate in democracy. When you have cities like Baltimore, where you have only a fraction of the people actually participating in the vote. And then these same people want to complain about the politicians not doing anything. But when these people had a chance to impact politics, to select the candidates that they want empowered to make change, they decided to stay home. You are defrauding yourself when you don't vote. You are defrauding yourself when you don't educate yourself about the issues, when you don't find out what the politicians' stance on various issues like police brutality, like racial profiling, like the war on poverty or the war on drugs or foreign affairs. If you don't educate yourselves on those types of issues, then you are defrauding yourself. You can't sit and point the finger at democracy and call it a fraud when you are shortchanging yourself by not even educating yourself. You can't talk about democracy being a fraud when you defraud yourself and your community by not holding candidates accountable for their failure to adhere to your agenda or their failure to keep their political promises. You can't talk about how democracy is a fraud when you're not even doing anything to take democracy back from corporations, when you're not lobbying for any kind of campaign finance reform or trying to fight the corporate takeover of democracy. You know, the politics that we get are a product of what we invest into politics. You know, if we don't invest in it, if we don't participate and try to affect change through politics, then we can't complain about things. We can't complain about a white supremacist like Donald Trump being elected if we did not vote in the election, if we did not put forth candidates to oppose him and stand behind those candidates. We can't complain about it. We can't complain about a Congress that doesn't act on issues that are important to us if we didn't even bother to vote for our member of Congress, if we didn't bother to vote for our senator. We can't complain about the conditions in our cities if we didn't even vote for the mayor, if we didn't vote for our city council people or our state representatives or our state senators. We can't complain about those issues. We can't complain about issues of, you know, the schools if we didn't bother to vote for our school board members. So we only get out of democracy what we invest into it. You know, we have to be the ones to make the change, man. We can't sit back and just say democracy is a fraud. You know, when we are the ones defrauding ourselves by not participating, by not educating ourselves, by not holding our elected officials accountable, by not, you know, taking democracy away from these corporations, you know, and putting the emphasis on people over profit. So, yeah, and I just think that it's odd that you would have somebody talking about how democracy is a fraud. And it's like these same people that talk about democracy being a fraud, and they talk about how these politicians haven't done anything for Black people, these same people can't point to any concrete structural change that they have brought about through their efforts. You know, I wonder, like, what kind of concrete change Umar Johnson can point to say that he accomplished X, Y, and Z. For instance, you have civil rights organizations. They can say, because of our lobbying efforts, this law and that law and this policy and that policy passed. Because of our lawsuit, we won this case and that case, and now X, Y, and Z plaintiffs have X, Y, and Z rights and are able to do X, Y, and Z. But when it comes to people like Umar Johnson, you can't point to anything like that. You know, the only accomplishments he can tell you about is being the most requested speaker. And that's great for his own personal aggrandizement, you know, for his pockets and all that kind of stuff. But what does that mean for the people? What kind of concrete things can he point to in terms of creating some kind of collective change? Or any of these people that you see on here? Any of them? So those are my thoughts. You know, I just wanted to respond to this video that I saw on Instagram. And for those of you who haven't seen it, the link will be in the description box so that you can watch it for yourself. So let me go through your comments real quick before I sign off. All right, so somebody said, please come to my YouTube outlet, Descendants of African Slaves. We are independent Black political party. Look me up. and this person has their name and all that kind of stuff. You know, I will look your channel up, but I think the better way for people, if you want to get your channel discovered, like I don't think that you do it by promoting it, doing, you know, somebody else's live stream, put your name out there, whatever. That's not the best way to promote your channel. You do it just by putting in the work. When you put in the work by producing regular and strong content, you will have the subs that you're looking for. You know, you will build the audience that you're looking for and get the attention you're looking for. All right, shout out to Big Game. Thanks for tuning in. Shout out to Bonafide 1970. Shout out to Sean. Shout out to Antron Bailey. Shout out to the Stone Gatherer. Yeah, we definitely need to be more informed about political issues, and definitely there are people that fall in that category that he's talking about. You know, people that are just about personalities and not about substance. So I will say that, but at the same time, you do have plenty of people who are informed about the issues, who do keep up with the news and, you know, look at the candidates' websites and their policy statements. So you have, you know, many people who are informed, despite what Umar Johnson was trying to suggest. Yeah, I'm going to look into that, Covina, man. You know, I'm going to look into that. Yeah, I'm going to look into that, and I may do a future video on that. I just need more information about it. Big Game said Umar is a master fundraiser. Yes, I mean, he's raised a lot of money, but it's like in terms of these issues that he talked about, the schools, economic opportunity, mass incarceration, police brutality. My thing is, what has he done in those areas besides give people lectures? Like what kind of lobbying effort is he involved in? What kind of protests has he organized? What kind of you know, what candidates has he put forth to run on those issues? What has he done? Period. You know, it's fine to give speeches and stuff like that because speeches empower people. You know, they may encourage people to investigate and study things, but we have to move beyond just talk. We have to move towards action, whether that's action in the courts or action through the political process, voting and civic engagement, or if that's activism, you know, by other means. You know, but there has to be some kind of action. It has to go beyond just talking about things and entertaining people with great speeches and stuff. Yeah, that's a good point, Bonafide. So Bonafide said, metaphorically speaking, to say that democracy is a fraud is like saying that health clubs are a fraud when you've never been a member of one. Or if you're a member and you never go in to exercise. Exactly. Like if you don't take advantage of the opportunities provided by democracy, you can't sit around and say that democracy is bad or democracy is flawed and all that kind of stuff. When you haven't done your part, we have to do our part and get engaged and involved. And I'm not saying that the political system is the answer to all our problems and that all we have to do is vote and chill. Obviously not. We have to use every single means that is available to us to bring about the change that we want to see in this world. That's what I'm saying. And it's like when people dismiss the idea of voting, you have to ask them, what is their proposal to address our problems? What do they plan to do in practical terms? Not in terms of fantasy island, not in terms of this abstract, you know, unrealistic talk of separation. You know, half of these people that talk this separation stuff live in integrated communities, live in predominantly white communities while they're lecturing black people about the need to separate. They don't have any real concrete plan to ever separate from America. So as long as you're in America and you're subjected and affected by the policies and laws that are passed in this country, then you need to participate in the politics so that you can have some kind of impact on what kind of laws and policies are passed. Because as long as we're not at the table, as you've heard time and time again, we're on the menu. As long as we don't vote, we don't count. As long as we're not engaged, nobody will engage with us. So yeah, so that's all I have to say about this. I want to thank you all for tuning in. It was an interesting video that he posted that raised some interesting questions. There are issues in democracy that need to be addressed, like the influence that corporations have over the political process, how they're able to give all this money to these candidates and run certain candidates and basically determine which candidates win these elections, if the people aren't engaged. But we see when the people are engaged, when the people are active, when the people vote in large numbers, they can counter the interests of these corporations time and time again. We saw this in that election in Bronx when that socialist candidate won, beat, a prominent Democrat there. It can happen. We saw when Barack Obama, for instance, beat Hillary Clinton. She had all these resources. Everybody assumed that she was going to win the nomination, and she lost to Barack Obama. So there is potential for us to affect change in politics. And, we need to realize that, man. We need to be willing to take chances and not only just vote for candidates. We need to put our money where our mouths are. If we say that we want progressives to run for office, if we want people that are concerned about the plight of our people to run, then we need to actually look for those candidates and financially support them. We know that many candidates will listen to those people who give them money for their campaigns more so than they'll listen to people who don't. So yeah, I wanted to share my thoughts about this. Before I go, I just want to comment on one other, in response to a couple of these other comments that people left. So Bonafide said that Dr. Umar Johnson is a Pan-Africanist. So to a degree, I can understand why he's not much invested in politics here in the US, but then I've never heard him talk about politics in Africa either. Yeah, he doesn't, I don't hear him talk about international affairs too much at all. I don't hear him talking about like a lot of stuff that's going on the continent of Africa. And my thing is, even if you're a Pan-Africanist, you should still be concerned about politics in America. That's where your people are right now. And your people are not going back to Africa anytime soon. Black people are not en masse going back to Africa anytime soon. You may have small little pockets of people who decide to go back to Africa, but that's not a collective solution to our problems. We have to deal with our problems right here in the United States. And one of the ways that you do that is by addressing the political system, through voting, through lobbying, through pressuring elected officials. That's what you have to do. And so, one of the most prominent Pan-Africanists was W.E.B. Du Bois, and he was an advocate for Black people having the right to vote, while at the same time, he also pushed for a strong and independent Africa. And you can have both. You can advocate for electoral politics and advocate for Pan-Africanism, the unification and liberation of all Black people worldwide, all Africans worldwide. You can do that. And in this country, through the electoral process, we can affect foreign affairs that impact our brothers and sisters on the African continent. We can do that, just as they can, as Malcolm X talked about, they can voice concerns about the plight of Africans in America in the UN by raising up their voices in the UN, condemning the racism that we see in America. So let's see what other people are saying before I close out. Yeah, so with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings to each and every one of you. Thanks for watching. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Get the likes up, hit that notification bell so that you'll know when I post new content. Peace.